Welcome back to the show. This week we interview Greg Crabtree from Simple Numbers 2.0. He's an author of that book and also the same guys that we use as for our company as CFOs to give us a crystal ball view of what's coming next, what the economy is doing, what we can prepare for, how to prepare, what kind of core capital we need to have in place, and how to read the numbers in a way that we can get the very best results and not be surprised as things move through. So I highly, highly recommend if you're running a business to have somebody that's managing those numbers with you or at least guiding you along the way so that you can make incredible decisions for yourself and for your company and not be running scared and kind of blind at this thing we call business. So tune in here. You're going to hear Greg drop a lot of great nuggets about what he thinks is coming in the economy over the next year and two, and what's some things in your business that you really need to focus on in order to make sure you don't just survive, but could possibly even thrive through these crazy times we're in right now. So enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Outer Spaces, a podcast dedicated to empowering designers and contractors in the outdoor living space. Through this show, I hope to create a powerful resource for you, someone who is trying to grow their company but might not have all the tools and processes to do so. On Outer Spaces, we're passionate about breaking the chains of small mindsets and helping contractors just like you take control of their businesses and their lives. My name is Joshua Gillow, and through my 25 years of dirt under the nails experience, I look forward to sharing tips, strategies, and other contractor success stories here on the Outer Spaces podcast. Now, let's get on with the show. Hello, welcome back to the Outer Spaces podcast. This is your host, Joshua Gillow. And today we have on the show again. He's been on many times. He's our go-to guy for everything economy and what's going on with the recession and in our industry from the number side of things. He has a 100 company model that he watches very closely to see what's happening. So what I love to do in my business is to make sure I have a sense of what's coming as much as we possibly can, like a crystal ball, if you will. And this man is that for us. He's been, him and his team have been CFOs for our company for a very long time. And we always enjoy meeting with them and getting going. He's the author of Simple Numbers 2.0. If you haven't read the book, go get it. His name is Greg Crabtree. Welcome back, Greg.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Greg. So, you've been on a couple of times, and each time we're always talking about the same basic thing because you're like the guy for that is what's going on in the economy right now and what can we prepare for, get ready for? What are we seeing? How can we have this crystal ball into the future? I know nobody knows what's going to happen, but what are you seeing out there right now especially from contracting and all that side?
Well, the first thing I want everybody to understand is we're living in a time that there's never been this situation of connected events like this before. So there's not a pattern to go back to and say, we can learn this from 1942, or we can learn this from 1963, or we can learn this from 2007. No, this is a whole new set of circumstances, which is one of the reasons why I've been a substantial critic of our monetary policymakers, because they're running 40-year-old playbooks for a brand new problem that has a whole different set of rules to it. And for the most part, our policymakers, in my opinion, have tended to just drive us into one ditch, to overcorrect, to drive us into the other ditch, and maybe even part way down the hill to then overcorrect and drive us back into the other ditch, and maybe part way down the hill, and hopefully they just don't drive us off into the ocean, because they're failing to understand things, and part of this goes back to why we have the 100 company model to begin with. Is that I just found that I couldn't really wait to rely on the government to finally come up with the statistical information that my clients needed for guidance. The fact that our practice is international, as well as all of our U.S. clients are all over the U.S., so we don't have a particular geographic focus. We don't have a particular industry focus. We have clients in just about every industry out there. And so the fact that we have this access to data and we have one way of seeing it, and this is the essential thing that I think the Simple Numbers philosophy really rises above the industry, is the fact that we see business in one format consistently across all businesses, and it works. It's given us a way for the data to talk, not me talk about the data. The data talks to us because of this structure. And essentially, it's quite simply a business engine and a chassis. And you're trying to align the engine to the chassis. And when you have an engine that's out of control, like we had in the previous decade before COVID, the chassis was getting pulled into the ditch from just too much activity and everybody over responding. And then we go into the disruption in the last couple of years, and and you had two different sets of fortunes. COVID sometimes made some businesses have great fortune and sometimes have bad fortunes. And so, so this constant adaptation. And really at the end of the day, even a subset of alignment in that is kind of our theme that your listeners know very well, is this idea of gross margin relative to labor. And our labor efficiency ratio that we talk about I'm just continually amazed at the consistency of how many companies, 90% of the businesses in the marketplace operate on one number. All right. So here's all right. I'm going to give your listeners a number. Really, everybody remember this number, 2. Everybody got that? Everybody remember the number 2. Why is it 2? Well, that means I need $2 of gross margin for every dollar of labor, regardless of whether it's direct or management. And 90% of the businesses, if you hit that standard, you're going to be, a nicely profitable business, not overtly profitable. I mean, you'll be a good profitable business. The more you drop below that, if you get outside of a 1.9, you're starting to struggle. You just cannot produce enough profitability to cover your operating cost. And and like I said, regardless of industry, and your industry is no different. I mean, that's really kind of that singular number. We have more finer tuned measures, like we use with your company of, your direct labor efficiency, your management labor efficiency. That's more relative to the play that you're running in your business of going, there's 3 plays in labor. I can be heavy direct and I have to be then light management. I can kind of be balanced in both, or I can be light direct and heavy management. Right. And so that's the reason why, if you look at industry data, it really is unusable to look at industry data across businesses, because you don't know what labor play they're running. You've got people in your industry that run all 3 of those plays, and their businesses are going to act different. Now, their total labor efficiency ratio has to come out to the same number, but how they accomplish it is more of their choice of art of how to attack it. And so these are things that make your ability to look at the marketplace and see what's happening, and people have not learned to interpret the data correctly from that. Plus the fact, the government doesn't know anything about anybody's business that's listening to this podcast. I mean, how many of you, what does the government know about your business? We're already through the first quarter of 2023. What do they know that you did in the first quarter of 2023? Nothing. How do they come up with these stats? Well, they're not looking at your business, which we are, at least the ones that we follow. And so that was the reason why we kind of came up with it. Now, all that said, here's what we're seeing. So when we look at our 100 company model, we've definitely seen a planing out of, we're now down to where I contend my data is showing that we've been in a recession since the third quarter of last year of 22. We started seeing a rolling 3 decline in revenue starting in June of 22. And it's continued for, 9 consecutive months. And so, you might, I guess, technically a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline. I would probably argue, I might give you that Q2 was a positive growth quarter. So that would mean we've been in a recession since the fourth quarter of 22 and obviously first quarter of 23. There's no doubt. We've seen a stabilization in the last 2 months. We've at least hit the bottom of that. Now, where it's going to go from here, okay, you got some headwinds. So let's kind of parse that out. So when your listeners, case, they're connected to the building industry, obviously. But, you're sometimes new construction, you're sometimes renovation construction. And so in those cases, all of our renovation contractors, we do several roundtables with renovation contractors across the country. Amazingly resilient. Their
Mm.
backlogs are good. What we are seeing in those groups is the size of project is coming down. So people aren't doing the big renovations that they have to go get, mortgage money to go do, but they're willing to spend money on their HELOC or cash that they have in pocket. And
Mhm.
they're recognizing that the real estate sales market is locked up for the foreseeable future. So they're going to make their current living space more appealing to them. So, so as long as you're not in a urban area, which most of your people are not, most of them are going to be in the suburbs and more rural, area, you're probably going to see some okay demand. I mean, it's not going to be off the chart, but it's going to be steady, and you should be able to run a successful business, and price it, effectively. Make sure you get, your costs are going up and those things, but you should be able to price it. But but there should be some okay demand. There gets to be a point though that there's the demand might have some gaps. So there are a couple of things that we're likely to see. We're likely to see some really bad contagion in the commercial real estate space. We've already seen a couple of properties miss mortgage payments and default on loans. That's going to continue. From a couple of the reports I've read, there's about a third of the commercial property that gets repriced to current interest rates this year. And when all of those properties get repriced to current interest rates, they cannot cash flow.
Yeah.
The interest rate will be too high. And so therefore they have to raise the rent. Well, they can't raise the rent because they're at declining occupancy. Commercial property is just, there is more and more and more space. And unless you live in kind of a bubble area, Huntsville, Alabama, where we live, we're in a bubble area. I mean, you got government contractors. You can't throw a rock without hitting a government contractor. And so we're busy. Nashville, I mean, Nashville's still growing like a
Crazy.
crazy weed.
Mhm.
In most of Florida, our clients down in Florida, I mean, they all seem to be, pretty busy. Texas is a little bit of a mixed bag. You've got a little bit of weakness in Austin, and definitely a more definite weakness in Houston. And so I think the Texas market might be a little more challenged in terms of the commercial space, than those others. But there again, it's affecting the marketplace. Here's the other thing that's going to affect you. If you're out there, you need to buy, production equipment, backhoe, other equipment, a trailer, and you expect to go finance it. Capital One, I think, announced last week that they're getting out of the floor planning business, for equipment financing.
Mm.
And so a lot of the dealers will lose some of their ability to carry equipment if they were being financed by Capital One. And as a general rule, most of the lead in the market is saying that the banks are pulling back on equipment financing. And so once again, the folks that follow kind of our principles, I mean, as much as I would like for you to finance that equipment if you can and not chew up your cash, you might need to be a little more extra careful to retain some cash, retain some of those profits in the business, because if you do need to make an equipment purchase, it's not going to be as easy, to finance it potentially. Now, just because Capital One gets out, it opens up the door for some of the others, but it's going to hurt your supplier's ability to keep stuff in stock because they can't keep
Mhm.
as much in stock if they can't floor plan it. And like I said, that financing may not be available to you as a purchaser, regardless of what your credit is. So there is certainly a constriction of credit out there. And so as you see these things start to impact, that's why I say I still think you're going to see okay demand, because we still have a lot of people who make a lot of money and have money.
Yeah.
And I think the people who will, pretty much, want to improve their home spaces because they're not going to buy a new house anytime soon, they're willing to spend some money. But you're going to see a different mix of customers more than likely.
No, it makes perfect sense. And, we got to keep switching and adjusting when it comes to business. Pre COVID,
Right.
you were in one model to work with. COVID came along. And for us, it was a huge boon. So many businesses were started to handle demand. And
Mm-hmm.
now, now, Greg, I'm thinking like, well, okay, well, I think we might start showing some of that over saturated market with, lots of new businesses trying to handle the demand of COVID. Now the demand of COVID is gone,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, or slowed down. Now we've got all these businesses that are all trying to fight for the same amount of food, if you will. So now it's going to be the strongest will survive. And how are you seeing that being affected out there in the market?
Well, I mean, you're going to, so I called from 2009 to 2019 was the participation trophy economy. You could be a bad business and survive and actually do
Yeah,
okay, because there was so much demand, excess demand that, you were, if you could just get something on the calendar, somebody do business with you. Not so much right now. And so, and for those people, this is kind of one of those times where you can't just go get business and be the cheapest because you will be out of business in a very quick fashion. You
for
got to be
sure.
profitable. I mean, there's no way to finance it. I mean, you got to do it, and you're going to see some defaults. You're going to see. I mean, this is when it always the contracting industry takes a hit. You will see people that will take deposits and things to start a job and ghost them,
Yeah.
and you're going to see the ghosting start to increase. And
Mm.
then, but now the good news is those people eventually, obviously, they exit the marketplace, and you're left with the good competitors. And so I think, and just the key is stick to your guns, say no to the work that, if you get into a race to the bottom in pricing, you are going to go out of business. You can't do that. But so
Yeah.
far, we've not actually seen that as an issue. All of our construction contractors have been able to maintain margin
Yeah.
and win the work, because I think the marketplace kind of expects that they want to deal with somebody who's got a track record, you got a history,
Yeah.
and you do what you say you're going to do when you do it.
Yeah.
And if you do those things, those people have been pretty stable. So I haven't seen a need for anybody to really get into a price war yet.
Oh, that's great. And that's just good rule of thumb in general for business, just to be in life
Mm-hmm.
is to be a man or woman of your word,
Yeah.
right? You tell a
Mm-hmm.
client, you tell somebody something and you do it. It's expectations. That's all we're trying to deliver to the client is expectation. So if we set expectation in the beginning with a design or with our entire proposal, and then we deliver or over deliver on that,
Right.
everyone's going to be, for the most part, happy, right? It's when you under deliver or when you price it really low and then you set expectations that aren't real, and
Mm-hmm.
then a client's pissed off or unimpressed at the end, and now you've got all kinds of extra money in there just trying to fix it for them.
Yep.
That's definitely a downward spiral. But to your point here earlier, if you don't know your numbers, if you don't know profitability, you don't know where that line is,
Yep.
you're going to get kicked by the horse. It's going to be very simple because you're going to want to win the project. And
Yeah.
in winning the project, you're going to lose your business.
Well, and I'll just share with you. I had a discussion with my renovation contractors, a couple of weeks ago, and he's got plenty of demand. And right now, if you come to him and say, "Hey, I got a project," he's going to say, "Well, it's November before I can start."
Yeah.
And so we had this discussion: should he spin up another, project manager? And because in his case, it would take an estimator and a project manager, to
Yeah.
actually, do that. And I said, you know, you could, but I'd rather you be you're nicely profitable where you're at.
Yeah.
And so this goes back into, kind of one of our core simple numbers philosophies is you got to get profitable with what you got before you think about growing. And not all growth is good. And I think we're heading into an economy where, there's a lot of constraints out there. And right now, your guys should have a pretty good year of what's in front of them. I can't give you that same prediction for next year, but
Yeah.
for this year, you should be able to put some hay in the barn. And I would say if there was ever a year to kind of be profitable and stick that money away, for future disruption, this would be the year to do it, because there's still cash, there's still demand, and with,
Yeah.
like I said, with the quirk of the real estate market like it is, people aren't going to be buying a new house anytime soon unless you see mortgage rates drop into the low fives to high fours. That's
Got it.
what will release the purchasing. But right now, see, all those people that normally would trade up to the next house, they actually they're making more money. They've gotten pay increases, but their mortgage isn't expanding. And so they actually have more spendable dollars. Now, as long
Got
as
it.
it doesn't get chewed up by other things that have gone up, inflation wise, which, has been a lot. But I think, people will definitely moderate their spending, and based on, kind of the data, that we're seeing from our company model, there's people are starting to make different choices with their disposable income. And as we saw during COVID, when people were locked down at home, they spent money on the place they live. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's still pretty high on the totem pole of where people, get a lot of utilization of value at.
It makes sense. If you're not going to be trading up, we've been in our home now 15, 16 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and we have no interest in moving, but I know some people just they don't do it that way, right? Their jobs change, or they just kind of, as they move through life, they're going to keep upgrading their homes. And when they do, they want to make it their own. So that was beautiful during the COVID time, but now they're kind of stuck in their spot because of values and because of interest rates. So, the question really is what plays out in the next, 12 to 24 months with them being there. Are they going to invest in them or just have it as a perch for a little while until they see what happens and then pop out of it?
Yeah.
But I still think there'll be demand throughout. Now, coming into 2024 is an election year.
Mhm.
What have you found, in election years? How does that affect, if our planning for business with, the craziness that is election time?
Well, I mean, at some point, the current administration starts to have some visits with the economic policymakers and say, listen, dude, I hear what you're saying, but we kind of need some lower interest rates. And now the question, the problem is, does that really, spike inflation? Here's the part that they haven't totally understood. The vast majority of inflation is being caused by wage increases. I mean, it's not, you can bring down inflation with as people lower prices on existing goods and inventory and dump them on the market to get their cash back. But then the next cycle is they have to charge more, and it goes back up. And
Yeah.
so there's a chart that we use in our presentation that shows the inflation of goods from 2000 to 2022 that's quite revealing. Everything that has gotten more expensive, it has significant amounts of labor associated with it. Everything that is more affordable in the last 22 years is something that has been imported, that wasn't labor that was done in the US.
Hmm.
And so the problem with these blended inflation numbers is it depends on, just look at the basket of goods that they used. And it's like, that's not what we actually spend money on. And so, the thing is we're still in a conundrum of we're at a stuck point in our labor force that we don't have an increasing labor force. And so therefore you cannot create true economic growth if you don't have an expanding labor force. And I don't see
Right.
them coming together and singing kumbaya about immigration anytime soon. So I got news for you. We're stuck to slightly declining. Oh, by the way, I would say labor productivity is at a historic low.
Hmm.
Yeah, I might have bodies. I mean, the biggest issue about all the layoffs that were publicized, these are people that were sitting around doing nothing anyway. And
Yeah.
so they weren't accomplishing anything. So the companies that laid them off they saved a lot of money, and they were thinking that they kind of needed. I mean, these are things big companies do. They're stupid. I mean, they just have these things that people do, and then all of a sudden they wake up and realize, oh, I got to do something about it. And I just had this
Hmm.
discussion with a client call right before this, and you think these big companies are smart. No, they're not. I mean, they're a day late and a dollar short, for the most part. And so the reality is they are affected by the same thing I just said a few minutes ago. You have to get profitable with what you got. And at
Hmm.
least they're starting to realize that for them to grow is not favorable at the moment in most of their cases. And if they're of the tech startup companies, I mean, they're just trying to become viable. Most of them were losing money anyway.
Yeah.
But the core companies, I mean, they're looking at this going, hey, they may be at the peak. And one of the statements that I start off with our current presentation about the economy is it is very likely that global output in real output measurement likely peaked in about 2019.
Hmm.
We're not producing more globally because population has stalled. I mean, we've got, I've mentioned it before, we've got these severe population inversions globally around the world, especially China has got the worst, or one of the worst. But we're going to see a world that is increasingly going to struggle to produce more. And ultimately that flips us on its head of where we don't have consumers either. We got all these people at the top. Well, as my generation, the baby boomers, start to die off, we're still consuming at probably a higher rate than previous retired generations have done. But that is going to that demand that we're putting on the marketplace will start to decline over the next couple of years. So you've got about a 3 to 5 year run that you really want to be as profitable as you can be, and get your reserves and get those in the barn, and we'll see what the world looks like in 5 years. But we're going to see some major population shifts, some supply chain shifts. That you're already starting to see it with kind of the deglobalization of the world, and more
Mm-hmm.
regionalization is really where trade's kind of getting to. And there's pros and cons to that. I mean, there's winners and there's losers, and you just kind of got
Yeah.
to figure your world of the people listening to this, bringing it back to them. As long as where we live and those things remain relatively stable, I think you're going to see probably less turnover of properties. People will become more focused in long-term ownership and staying where they're at and continuing to
Yeah.
improve where they're at. So I think for
Mm-hmm.
your listeners, these are things that probably point more to a positive for them. And so only the people that are affected by new construction, that's going to be very spotty, I think.
Got it. Now, I'm just going to switch gears here with you, Greg. And I don't know how much you get into this, but I want to just bounce it off you. This AI and all this stuff coming to replace a lot of the workforce, like Chat GBT and
Mm-hmm.
Jasper and all these guys, like all this stuff coming where it's going to replace a lot of people. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's good and bad to it. I mean, I still go back to those Terminator movies, and the one question I want to
Mm.
ask GPT for is, has the singularity already occurred? So
Yeah.
that would be somebody can pose that question and see what it says. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's good and bad to it. There's obviously people already pushing back against it. Let's face it. I mean, we need automation of jobs. Now the question becomes, and what none of us really kind of know how it plays out is, the list that I've seen of what it replaces, that doesn't help us a lot.
Yeah.
These are jobs that, you know, I mean, some of the folks that have those jobs may not like it, but those people are generally, transferable skills to other things that don't as easily get done by it. But last time I checked, AI is not going to get out and do yard work, or lay uh, lay patio tiles, and it's not going to put a roof on a house. It's not going to mow it. Well, mowing yards. Actually, some of our clients already are playing with some of the automated mowing stuff. But even as they look at that, they say doesn't save them a ton of labor. You still got to
Yeah.
have a person that goes out, and there's not an economic model yet to figure out kind of how to use it. But the reality is, if you going back to what I said earlier about the population inversion, I mean, the U.S. is at a 1.6 replacement birth rate and falling, not rising. We're falling still, and and I did my part. I had 4 kids, but my kids are failing. I mean, I've only got 4 granddaughters, and I might get one or two more, but I keep telling my kids, you're underperforming. So let's go.
Let's
and and
go.
and and unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of pushback. I mean, you talk to the people in the birthing years of life, and many of them are hesitant to have any more kids, or have
Mhm.
kids at all. And that sounds lovely until you look at the macro impact of that. And we're going to see China implode right before our eyes here in the next 3 to 5 years, based on some of the things that I've read, and that's going to shock everybody. You're going to see a society that a couple of years ago everybody was going, "Ooh, look out for China." Yeah, look out for China, because I mean, they're going to go through societal suicide. By a 1.1 replacement birth rate for the country, maybe, and it's a zero 0.7 in their urban areas. I mean, their cities will start to become ghost towns, fairly rapidly. And that,
Take us a
and
little deeper into that, Greg, so that listeners can get a better sense of that birth rate and why it's so important, especially for big economies like China.
well, I mean, you go back to, I mean, go back to what Henry Ford did when he created the assembly line. He brought people in off the farm and gave them a good, steady, I mean, let's start with this. I mean, when we were in agrarian society, because I grew up on a farm, you know how
Yep.
often you get paid when you work for a farm? Once
Not
a
very
year.
often.
All right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
let's just establish that standard right now. How many
Mhm.
people listening to this could survive if they only get paid once a year for
Yeah.
what they do? I mean, that is a tough model.
Yep.
Well, so you come in off the farm and you get paid every 2 weeks. Probably got paid weekly back then. And as Henry Ford said, not only did he create more availability of product that there was pent up demand for, he created consumers. Now, so let me ask you this about AI: is AI a consumer? I mean,
I would I would say no.
AI, no, it's not a
Yeah.
consumer. It doesn't pay taxes. It doesn't,
Yep.
it helps you produce, but it also takes away a consumer's role that you need to trade with.
Okay.
And so these are the things that the when I talk to I got to do my EO at Wharton program, and we were talking with our lead professor David Wessels, who I really have super high respect for. And these were some of the interesting discussions that kind of came up during that week of classes. That it's like he'd be the first one to tell you, we don't know how this plays out, and
Yeah.
everybody just has a guess. I think to a certain degree, we need automation to fill the gap of lack of workers, because there's
Yeah.
just certain things that you can't offshore to remotely somewhere. I've got to have a physical person to go do it.
Mhm.
But all the low hanging fruit of automated jobs have already been done.
Mhm.
When you had the bubonic plague, that was the last time we had global decline in population to appreciable degree, and that ushered in the Industrial Revolution. And so, but those were all the low hanging fruit jobs of, why automate when I can just throw bodies at it? Well, we don't have
Mhm.
those bodies to throw at it anymore, but we don't have those bodies to also be consumers anymore. And
Makes
so,
sense.
so it's going to be an interesting, what you're going to see is a world of product of going, what are the necessaries versus the discretionaries? And so when I talk to my clients, and I put them in those two groups. So I have clients who are the necessaries and clients who are the discretionaries. And if you're in the discretionary space, how do you get to the top of that food chain to where you're one of the highest choices of spendable dollars versus you're one of the easiest ones to spit out,
Mm.
and do without. But even in the necessaries, people turn down their thermostat, in the winter and turn it up in the summer, and so you can affect your utility bill. You can affect, your telephone bill, or use a different plan or change to a different carrier. Take all of those, the utility things. There are still some choices in it,
Yeah.
but it's a very dynamic equation that, as I said before, we've never experienced it, and so everybody's making a guess as you try to see how it's going to play out,
That makes perfect sense.
myself
So
included.
as
Yeah.
yeah, that's I think that's pretty much everybody. You've been around doing this a very long time, Greg.
Mm.
So, next 90 days, let's just say 1, 2 quarters.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on, core cash, core capital, and all of that as we move through this possibly certain, maybe not certain time.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're not, go back to the simple numbers core philosophy. I mean, so number one, you got to get profitable what you got, and
Yep.
so for most of the people listening to this, what you want to be, because your guys deal with a lot of cost of goods sold. I'm become more of a fan of looking at profit relative to gross margin. So take your
Mhm.
revenue minus your COGS, but before labor. Look at that as your true economic top line. And I want you to be no less than 15. 20 is a good target, 20% target. 25 is really where I think you want to be, especially in your busy season, for
Mhm.
that. I think that is a cleaner way of looking at it, as I've learned. Now, I will tell you, if you get to a 2 total labor efficiency ratio, you're going to be between 20 and 25% profit to gross margin. It's just hardwired. And so that's one of the easier methodologies of saying, listen, hey, here's my labor. So when we're already into April, so let's use May as an example. So by the time people listen to this, May 1st, how much labor are you going to spend in the month of May? Take that number times 2. That's your gross margin target that you got to go get your teams to go produce, bill to for the month of May. And if you do
Got
that,
it.
you'll be okay. And the key is you got to start it at the first of the month. So I can come within a reasonable approximation of my labor on the first day of the month of what I'm going to spend prospectively across that month. And then I got 4 weeks to do something about it. And you measure, each week, am I getting gross margin across the door? We had a call with one of our Canadian clients yesterday, and I mean, we've been working with these guys for probably, 5 years. And I'm still reinforcing this idea that he had some projects with some high pass-through cost, and just getting their eyes off of revenue. And it's like, listen, I don't really care what your gross margin percentage is. It's just an indicator of what kind of your mix of work is. What I care about is gross margin dollars. And tell me how many, and I gave him the same spiel. I said, listen, you got to get to $2 of gross margin dollars for every dollar of labor, management and direct, for your business. And he's in a totally different industry than your listeners, but it doesn't matter. It's the same
Yeah.
principle.
Yep. It
As I
makes
like to
perfect
say, I
sense.
wish it was more
Yeah.
complex. I could charge more for it, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, and you mentioned a good point here about your gross revenue minus cost of goods sold, because especially in like where we're heavily design managed, so the numbers look crazy, like you just see
Yeah.
big numbers, but then once you factor out cost of goods sold, the direct
That's right.
labor of subcontracting, all that stuff, and you get a number, it's like, okay, that's humbling, because
Well,
there's a lot of cost in that.
and the thing is, you can have an item that costs $100,000 and an item of COGS and an item that costs $5,000, and the $5,000 item requires more labor to work with than the $100,000 item that's a plug and play.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that could be.
and the way
Yeah,
I kind of describe it, and I try to find different ways to say this so the light bulb goes off. Your gross margin dollars is what the market respects of your value add to the stuff that you are deploying. That's really the true value indication of what you bring to the table as a business, not the revenue number. You're just
yeah,
you're just the resource manager of getting the stuff. It's what you do with the stuff, and that gross margin is that pure value add thing that the market respects. And if your gross margin is not enough, it means the market doesn't respect what you do. So what are you going to do differently for the market to respect what you do to get that gross margin higher for the amount of labor that you're doing?
mm, good question. It's a good question. I think the secret is getting your thumb on the pulse of your client to see what they truly want and need and desire, and not just get stuck on what you've been doing because it's worked, but really get intimate with your clients in a
Well,
way that what's
it,
driving them.
and I'll share with you an interesting study. So in our reporting class that I had last month, the professor was telling this story that when COVID hit, they surveyed all of their companies that send their teams there for executive education, and they said, oh, we need everything to be online. Online is the way it's going to go. I mean, we're not ever going to go back into the classroom. So they worked their tail off during COVID to get everything online. As soon as lockdowns were over, what do you think the people did? They
Back to
wanted to be
school.
back in the classroom.
Yep.
Yeah, and so you're 100% correct that you got to get close to your customer. Just don't
Mhm.
listen to what they say. Pay attention to what they do.
Mm, I love that.
What they say, I mean, they will tell you stuff that, I mean, and
Yeah.
this is just, I mean, and I think most marketers will tell you, doing customer sentiment surveys is, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to watch people vote with their feet and
Yeah.
watch what they do, watch their emotional reaction to things. And that's, so you're absolutely right. You got to get close to them, but in a different way that's more nonverbal than I'm going to watch them and work off of them and learn from that. And most of the time, what you'll be able to do, and it's the reason why you do customer profiling, is create kind of that persona and
Yeah.
understand kind of this person fits this persona, and so they are generally going to act in this profile way, regardless of what they say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's definitely good insight for sure. Greg, any other thoughts you have before we wrap up here that you want to bestow on our listeners?
Well, I mean, I think this is a great summer to get the hay in the barn. And so, like I said, our number one play right now, we're telling everybody is that, listen, you got to get profitable with what you got. It's less about growth. I mean, if you want to take on the growth, I mean, yeah, there's a way to do it. But understand that, I don't see long-term demand like we saw from '09 to 2019 because we have a damaged engine. We don't have the people. When my generation started retiring from about 2017 till 22, that was that they took a lot of the steam out of the economy in terms of producers, but they added demand, which has created a lot of the inflation. And
Okay.
as our generation moderates their spending in retirement, and it always does, then you're going to take some of that steam off the demand. But we also have a declining group of customers coming up. One of the big
Yeah.
holes. This is it's really stumping a lot of people. We're missing in the workforce a lot of 20 to 35-year-old males that
Hmm.
have just disappeared, and a lot of them are just doing gig work and staying out of the for hire economy of being an employee somewhere. A significant shortage of those 20 to 35-year-old males in terms of professional positions and those things, and and that's troubling. And so, but we've got to deal with it. I mean, you've got to just respond to the conditions at hand. But it's really a time to just be more focused on, if you do grow, what we like is more try to grow as incrementally as possible. If I
Mhm.
can do it by adding one more person, adding and fill that person up, and then add the next person, add the next person. But to make bold jumps in growth potential, just understand the risks that you're taking, because you're making that bold. Either, yes, I have the capital, I've done my research, and I really feel confident that I've got that demand that's there, um, and you got a way to finance that growth. And so, now we try to teach people to grow with their own profits so that the bank's not an issue. But I've
Right.
got some clients who can't do that, or they've chosen not to do that. And now, as interest rates have shot up, they're in a little bit of a world of hurt. They're that uh, that issue's coming home to roost. So, but
Yeah.
I'd say get
Yeah.
profit what you got and
Yeah.
hit that 2-month core capital target number. And I would probably even go one step further into your personal finances and just make sure that you've got your 6 to 12 months of personal living expenses set aside in a risk
Mhm.
free savings. I'm still a huge fan. I know people kind of criticize me for this, but I'm telling you, I'm batting 1,000 on it. If everybody I've convinced to do it is, even on the personal side, hey, have a paid for personal residence. You have so much staying power as a business owner to have a paid for personal residence. I'm
Yeah.
you know I'm telling you, I'd make that your number one personal financial goal.
So to pay off your mortgage and get down to just having that asset in your pocket.
Absolutely. And the interest rate is irrelevant. I don't care what your interest rate is. You could have a 1% interest rate. I'd still tell you to owe no man anything personally is where you're as bulletproof as you can get, from that standpoint. And I'm telling you, we got some fire that we're going to be taking on in the economy here over the next few years. And if you want to be one of the winners, you got to be prepared for it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that, Greg. And I love our conversation every time you come on. So I appreciate you coming on and
enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And telling us what's going on out there, what you're seeing. Hope the listeners have gotten a lot from this as much as I have, because each and every time I listen to you, Greg, I'm always taking notes and grabbing information that you're sending out, because it impacts everything. It impacts everything. And we don't have a crystal ball of the future, but I've found that Greg is probably as close as I've come to the one that knows what he's doing with this. And so I appreciate you being back on the show, Greg. And any listeners out there that want to reach out to you, they want to, first of all, you can go buy on Amazon. You can go buy Simple Numbers 2.0, amazing book. That's how I found Greg. And Greg, how else can they engage you? What other services you have in case they're curious?
Yeah, so the easiest way is our website that's just for the consulting practice, simplenumbers.me, and it'll direct you. We're part of Carr, Riggs and Ingram, a top 20 U.S. accounting firm, but that is the site that's specific to just Simple Numbers. You certainly feel free to reach out to me via email, greg.crabtree@cricpa.com. One of the things on going to the website, you can also sign up for our quarterly webinars, or we have a series of webinars, but we're going to start one in May that we're going to do a quarterly economic update where we'll show slides from our 100 company model and go in depth and discuss that. So I've finally decided I've watched the data long enough. I feel comfortable talking about it, publicly. We've been sharing it privately with our clients and giving them guidance, but much like this, we feel like the broader community needs to hear some of this information, because I think we get to see it 3 to 4 months sooner than it shows up in the official statistics. And it's where, hey, you got to get early information as soon as you can, to make business decisions. You can't be, 3 to 4 months behind the curve.
No, I totally agree. And ever since I brought you guys on and work with Jack each month and go through the numbers and see what we got to do, should we hire, should we not, what should we do, what should our margins be, how are we doing, what's our LER, what's our labor efficiency rate, like all these kinds of things, it has absolutely changed the way we do business. Mm-hmm. And now we're open book, so everybody in the company is part of those conversations, so cool. Each one can see how see what their impact is on this, whether they're selling or whether they're, project management or running the front lines, like they know what they're doing and how it affects the bottom line at the end of the day. And the crazy part is, Greg, and what I found is that, the more you open up the books to people, the more they start acting like owners.
Yeah.
They start thinking like owners.
Yeah, and that's really kind of where our simple numbers approach is a little bit easier to teach people, because we only focus on a handful of numbers. I mean, we're not trying to turn you into a CFO, and most CFOs don't know how to make money anyway. And so it really is that, hey, it's not as complex as everybody thinks, and there's no magic bullet. It is $1 of labor input. What is that gross margin output? And everybody remember the number. The number's 2. 2. We're going for 2.
I love it. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Appreciate it. Thanks.